Clinton Correctional Facility, Dannemora, New York, February 1995. Cell Block C. Tupac Shakur sat on a concrete bed in a 6x9-foot cell, staring at a piece of paper covered in his handwriting. Outside his cell, guards walked past. Other inmates shouted to each other. The prison industrial complex ground on like it always did. But inside that cell, something miraculous was happening. Tupac was writing a song that would become his first top 10 hit. A song that would shoot to #1 while he sat behind bars. A song that would make him the first artist in history to have a #1 album while serving a prison sentence. The song was called Dear Mama, and when his mother, Afeni Shakur, heard it for the first time on the radio, she broke down crying in a way she hadn't cried since the day Tupac was born. But to understand why this song mattered so much, why it changed everything for Tupac, you need to know what brought him to that cell. And more importantly, you need to know about the phone call he made 3 days before writing those lyrics. November 1994. Tupac had just been shot 5 times at Quad Studios. His body was broken but healing. His trust in people was shattered and wouldn't heal. And on top of everything else, he had a sexual assault trial verdict coming. The jury convicted him on 3 counts. The judge sentenced him to 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison. "This is a setup," Tupac said in court. "I'm innocent," but the system didn't care about his innocence or guilt. The system had decided that Tupac Shakur, the rapper who criticized police brutality and systemic racism, needed to be silenced. And prison was how they do it. When the cell door closed behind him at Clinton Correctional Facility on February 14, 1995, Tupac faced a reality he'd feared his entire life. His mother, Afeni, had done time while pregnant with him. His stepfather, Muchulu, was serving 60 years for armed robbery. The Black Panther legacy in his family was one of incarceration and resistance. And now it was his turn. The first few days were the hardest. Not because of the other inmates, who mostly left him alone or treated him with respect. Not because of the guards, who ranged from indifferent to openly hostile, but because of the silence. The absolute crushing silence of having nothing but time to think. And Tupac thought about everything, about being shot. About Biggie standing there doing nothing, about the trial, about the woman who accused him, about his career that might be over before he turned 25. About dying in prison like so many black men before him, but mostly he thought about his mother. Afeni Shakur had been fighting for 3 weeks to get on Tupac's visitor list. The prison kept denying her requests. Some administrative excuse, some paperwork issue, but Tupac knew the real reason. They wanted to break him by isolating him from the one person who'd never given up on him. On the 3rd night in his cell, Tupac was granted a phone call. Most inmates would call their lawyers or their girlfriends. Tupac called Jada Pinkett. Jada had been his closest friend since Baltimore School for the Arts. She knew him when he was just a kid who loved Shakespeare and dance. She'd seen him transform into the angry revolutionary rapper, and she'd never judged him for any of it. "Pac?" Jada's voice came through the prison phone, concerned and loving. "I need you to hear something," Tupac said. And then, right there on a prison phone with a 15-minute time limit, he started reciting lyrics he'd been writing in his head. Lyrics about his mother, about her crack addiction in the 80s, about her struggle as a single parent, about all the times he'd judged her and failed to understand what she was going through. "And even as a crack fiend, mama, you always was a black queen, mama," Tupac recited. His voice cracked on the word mama. Jada was silent on the other end. Tupac could hear her breathing, could almost hear her crying. "Why are you telling me this?" Jada finally asked. "Because my mama struggled with the same thing your mama struggled with," Tupac said. "This song isn't just about Afeni. It's about every mama who did her best in impossible situations." "Pac, you have to finish this song," Jada said. "The world needs to hear this." "I will," Tupac promised. "But I need to talk to my mama first. I need to tell her I finally understand." 3 days later, Afeni was finally approved for visitation. The prison visiting room was everything you'd expect. Cold, institutional, guards watching everything. Phones with glass between them. No physical contact allowed. Afeni sat down and picked up the phone. Tupac picked up his side. Mother and son looked at each other through bulletproof glass. "Baby," Afeni said. That's all she could say. Just that one word, baby. Tupac started crying. Not the angry tears of betrayal he'd cried after Quad Studios. Not the frustrated tears of the guilty verdict. These were different tears. Healing tears. Understanding tears. "Mama, I wrote something for you," Tupac said. "I can't sing it here, but I wrote it. And when I get out, the whole world is going to hear how much I love you." Afeni knew her son, knew he was working on an album, knew he was always writing. But she didn't know yet that this album, this song, would change both their lives forever. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Afeni said. "I already know you love me." "No," Tupac insisted. "I need to say it. I need to say I'm sorry for judging you, for not understanding what you went through, for being a stupid kid who thought he knew everything." This was the conversation they'd needed to have for years. Since Tupac was a teenager watching his mother struggle with crack cocaine. Since the nights he'd gone hungry because the addiction was stronger than everything else. Since he'd left home at 17 because he couldn't watch her destroy herself anymore. "I forgave you for leaving a long time ago," Afeni said. "You were just a kid. You did what you had to do to survive. But I should have understood," Tupac said. "You taught me about systemic oppression, about how the system crushes black people, about how crack was deliberately introduced to black communities to destroy us. I knew all that intellectually. But I couldn't see it when it was you. I couldn't see that you were a victim too." This understanding, this breakthrough became the foundation of Dear Mama. The song wasn't just about love. It was about forgiveness. About finally seeing your parents as human beings instead of superheroes or villains. About understanding that people can be flawed and still be worthy of love. Back in his cell after that visit, Tupac wrote furiously. The lyrics poured out of him in a way they never had before. Usually, he'd write a verse, think about it, revise it. But Dear Mama came out complete, honest, raw. "You are appreciated," he wrote, just those 3 simple words for the chorus. But they carried the weight of everything he'd never been able to say to his mother's face. The album Me Against the World was already mostly finished when Tupac went to prison. But Dear Mama was the final piece, the song that tied everything together. Because the album was about isolation, about feeling like the world was against you, about paranoia and pain, but it was also about survival, about finding light in darkness, about the people who love you even when you're at your worst. Tupac couldn't go to a studio to record, so the label had to get creative. They arranged for recording equipment to be brought to the prison. Under heavy guard, with strict time limits, Tupac laid down his vocals for several tracks including Dear Mama. The prison recording sessions were surreal. Tupac in chains, surrounded by guards, pouring his heart out about his mother's love. The engineer later said it was the most emotional recording session he'd ever been part of. You could hear the prison ambience in the background if you listened closely. Distant shouts, metal doors, the industrial sound of incarceration. Me Against the World was released on March 14, 1995, exactly 1 month after Tupac entered prison. The reviews were immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Critics called it Tupac's most introspective, most mature, most emotionally honest work. But the real test was the charts. In the first week, the album sold 240,000 copies. That was huge. But what happened next was unprecedented. Me Against the World debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. Tupac Shakur, sitting in a cell at Clinton Correctional Facility, became the first artist in history to have a #1 album while incarcerated. When the guards told him about the chart position, Tupac didn't celebrate. He just nodded and asked if he could make a phone call. He called Afeni. "Mama, we're #1, Tupac said when she picked up. Afeni was silent. Then she started laughing. Not a happy laugh. A disbelieving laugh? The laugh of someone who'd seen too much injustice to fully trust good news. "They let you have a #1 album from prison?" Afeni asked. The same system that locked you up is now making you rich? It's not about the money, Mama, Tupac said. It's about the message getting out. It's about people hearing what I have to say even though they tried to silence me. Dear Mama was released as the lead single in February 1995. The song climbed the charts steadily. By April, it was top 10. By May, it was top 5. It peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100, but it spent weeks in the top 10. More importantly, it became a cultural phenomenon. Radio stations played it constantly. TV put the video in heavy rotation. But here's the thing about the Dear Mama video that makes it even more powerful. Tupac wasn't in it. He was in prison. So the video featured an actress playing Afeni and an actor playing young Tupac, recreating moments from their lives. At the end, the real Afeni appears, looking at the camera with tears in her eyes. The video ended with text on screen. Tupac Shakur is currently serving a prison sentence. This video was created to honor his mother and all mothers who struggle. When Afeni saw the video for the first time, she watched it alone in her living room. And she cried for the entire 4 minutes and 29 seconds. Not sad tears, healing tears. Her son, who she thought she'd lost to anger and violence and the streets, had come back to her. Not physically, not yet, but spiritually. He'd come home. The success of Me Against the World and Dear Mama did something unexpected. It changed how people saw Tupac. Before prison, he'd been known primarily as a controversial, aggressive, violent rapper. The guy who shot at cops. The guy who got shot at Quad Studios. The guy who seemed determined to burn his career down. But the prison album showed a different side: vulnerability, introspection, love. Suddenly, suburban white mothers who'd never listened to rap were hearing Dear Mama and crying. Suddenly, people who'd written Tupac off as a thug were reconsidering. Maybe there was more to this young man than headlines suggested. Inside Clinton Correctional, Tupac's life changed too. Other inmates treated him with even more respect. Guards who'd been hostile became more neutral. He received thousands of letters from fans. But more importantly, he received letters from other inmates' mothers, thanking him for the song. Thanking him for putting into words what their sons couldn't say. One letter in particular moved Tupac. It was from a woman whose son was serving life for murder. She wrote, "My son played me your song and said this is how he feels about me. He's never been able to say he loves me or appreciates me. Thank you for giving him the words." Tupac kept that letter. He'd pull it out and read it when prison felt too heavy, when the injustice of his situation threatened to make him bitter. The letter reminded him why his art mattered, why he couldn't give up. The Grammy nominations came in December 1995. Me Against the World was nominated for Best Rap Album. Dear Mama was nominated for Best Rap Solo Performance. Tupac was still in prison when the nominations were announced. By this point, Suge Knight, the CEO of Death Row Records, was negotiating Tupac's release. The deal was simple but expensive. Knight would pay Tupac's $1.4 million bail. In exchange, Tupac would sign with Death Row and produce 3 albums for the label. Some people called it a deal with the devil. Death Row had a reputation for violence and intimidation. But Tupac saw it as his ticket out of prison. And more than anything, after 8 months behind bars, he wanted out. October 13th, 1995. Tupac walked out of Clinton Correctional Facility a free man, ending his appeal. Suge Knight was waiting for him in a limousine. The first thing Tupac did was not celebrate, not party, not go to a club. He went home to see his mother. The reunion between Tupac and Afeni after his release was private. No cameras, no interviews. Just a mother and son who'd been through hell together and survived. "Thank you for the song," Afeni said, hugging her son for the first time in 8 months. "Thank you for never giving up on me," Tupac replied. That night, they sat together and listened to Dear Mama on the radio. When it came on, neither of them spoke. They just listened. And when the song ended with the chorus, "You are appreciated," they both had tears in their eyes. "I wish I could have been a better mother," Afeni said. "You were perfect, Tupac told her. You were exactly the mother I needed.